Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi guys, this is your host, Alicia Debrell from Insight Media. And today I have the privilege to interview Marilyn Agee. Marilyn is a Texas real estate agent, a member of TAR, NAR, and many others. Marilyn specializes in a specific type of real estate transaction, and that is a transaction either with land, horse property, farms, and ranches in the state of Texas. She is certified in Green Farm and Ranch and is a preferred Texas Veteran Land Board realtor, which pretty much makes her the go-to person if you're considering buying or selling any one of these types of properties. She also comes with over 15 years of professional design experience, which makes her a huge asset to anybody looking to sell any investment. She is a talented author and all-around pure-blood Texan. She is going to educate us on what these different types of properties are, what they're used for, and how to go about buying or selling this niche set of investments. Without further ado, I want to welcome Marilyn. Hi, Marilyn, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Alicia. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great today.
Good. Well, let's get right on into it. Can you tell us and our listeners a little bit about yourself and where you come from?
Well, I'm a native Texan, born in Corpus Christi, lived in Texas all my life until I married in 1993 and moved away for a little while and then came back and started into real estate 4 years ago. Well, 5 years ago, actually.
I know that you're a member of quite a few groups. Can you tell us a little bit about what they are and what they do?
Well, the National Association of Realtors and Texas Association of Realtors are two of the major groups I'm involved with. I'm also involved in a group called Diva Wow, which is a group of women. The founder is Judy Rhodes in Dallas. It is an organization that helps women who are interested in outdoor activities, and she also has a program where she trains and teaches young children to enjoy outdoor sports. So it's a real fun group of gals.
Cool. And then I know you also have a certification or two. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Why exactly you got those kind of certifications?
NAR, the National Association of Realtors, has a certified program in green living. And that is an educational program where you look at everything in recycling and using less energy and less water and building in areas that become self-sufficient. So it is a whole encompassing sort of new way of living to be more environmentally aware of using the land and positioning a house to where the sun sets a certain way so you can warm and cool your home in different seasons.
That's really cool. That's, so that way you can not only, help your bills, but you can also help the environment. Okay, Marilyn, can you tell me a little bit about who your clients are and how do you help them?
My client usually is a client that wants to be out of the big cities like San Antonio, Austin. We're situated just between those two cities. They're still near shopping, dining, airports, yet they have a little bit of country living, views. It's a very hilly, beautiful green topography here. So I get a lot of empty nesters and retirees that want to build their forever home here or find a home that they are downsizing to and can be comfortable for the rest of their lives. So they want to have a little bit of property. And then there's the other client that wants to come and farm or ranch, who have horses. They want to get into that country life, or they're already in it and they're getting larger property. So they want to move toward the outskirts of town. They're still more rural. So it's a different class of people, really.
Now, do you only deal with properties between Austin and San Antonio, or do you go outside those areas too?
I normally don't. I've pretty much got everything I can handle right here in this area.
Yeah, that is probably, 70 miles or something between there, right?
Oh, my goodness, no. I mean, I can travel, 100, 200 miles in a day if I'm showing a lot of big, because we can go all the way south of San Antonio or north of Austin. I mean, it just encompasses a huge geographical area. So depending on their desires and what their needs are, it could be 100 miles. Because the land's so spread out. It's very spread out.
Yeah, it looks smaller on the map to me. Now, these are a different kind of properties, and there's different kind of properties that are available that you deal with. Can you tell me the differences between them? Like, what's the difference between a horse property and a ranch? So, to me, it sounds like the same thing. And then, like, what's the difference between farm and land? Again, can you go into a little bit more specifics on those?
Yeah, I mean, I would call a horse property is a piece of property that's probably 5 acres or more that allows horses. There are a lot of subdivisions around here that don't allow horses, so you have to be careful where you start searching. But, so that could be a horse property, or you could have a horse ranch, or you could have a cattle ranch. So, and I may be saying this wrong, but it's not so much a difference in the land as it is what you're doing with it. So a ranch could be just a casual entertainment ranch, and so they also use the term ranchette, which would mean a smaller piece of land, but bigger than 5 acres. So mostly the people I deal with have horses or they're farming, and the farming around here is mostly a Bermuda coastal hay. Get a little further south, you'll get corn and cotton. But mostly around here, it's more casual horse property, folks that are either showing horses, Western or English, and then you've got the other set that does a breeding program that they have several horses that they breed, so they'll want a larger piece of property. Normally around here, you can have 3 horses per 5 acres, according to the county's regulation. So farming is more farming the land. You're growing a crop. You're growing crops. And ranching is more about animals, having horses, cattle, sheep, goats, that kind of thing.
All right. So now, what kind of features affect the prices besides acreage? Either, no matter which type of property you're buying, like are there any features that would be more expensive than others, or different areas maybe that are more expensive than others?
There are more expensive areas. The further away you get from the city, the less expensive the land becomes. So you're looking at acreage out away from the city that goes anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 per acre, and then you get a little closer into the city and you get all the way up to $18,000 to $25,000 per acre. So those numbers change whether you have a house on it, you have utilities, such as electricity, water available, telephones available. Fencing makes a difference. Tanks, we call them tanks. It's a pond. Most people, I grew up in Texas calling them tanks. I don't know where that term came from, but a true Texan when you hear somebody say, they have a tank on it. Yeah, but it's not an army tank. So, and then, the house, how big is it? How new is it? The age of it? The barn, what shape is the barn in. A lot of horse people, real true horse people, first thing they go and look at is the barn. Then they look at the house. It's just a weird horse thing. So, if you're farming like that, and even ranchers have cattle, they want to know, it's got chutes on it for the cattle. Has it got good feeding pens? Has it got grazing? Has it got this? And the house, that's secondary because you don't do anything but eat and sleep there.
There's a lot more details that come into play when you're dealing with these type of transactions I had no idea about.
Absolutely.
So what would you say if somebody was thinking in investing in any one of these properties? What would you say is the biggest myth or maybe a misconception that your client should be aware of when thinking of purchasing maybe a ranch, for instance?
I think the biggest misconception is the maintenance. People think, well, I want a big piece of property and I want to just enjoy that property. I want to be close enough to a city, but I want land around me, and I don't want my neighbors looking in my doors and that kind of thing. The maintenance, maintaining that property can be a real issue because our weather here is so sporadic. Like we've just come off of having huge floods in the area. Probably seen that in the news. And now we're almost in a drought situation. So we have all this overgrown vegetation on the property. And if you don't keep up with that, then it turns into a jungle. And then when we have a drought, it turns into a dead jungle. So, as you have fences, you've got to make sure they stay maintained. So I think maintaining a larger piece of land, even though you keep it, you want it looking natural. If you're in a subdivision especially, but you want it to look manicured.
So, Marilyn, with these ranches and these different subdivisions with horse property and stuff in there, is there HOAs or are there certain rules like there would be in a normal subdivision?
There are certain areas that have subdivision. Some have HOA fees, some do not. Some are mandatory, some are not. Some are high-end with golf courses and high-end country club atmosphere. And then there are smaller ones that are more rural-looking, but yet they have very strict restrictions, and they have common areas that are not as fancy as some of the golf courses areas around here. Then you also have areas that are completely unrestricted. So it's kind of mixed and mingled in throughout different counties through this whole area. But there are certain ones do have large fees, HOA fees, and some have no mandatory HOA.
So talk to me about land. What is a typical client of yours looking for when they just say, I'm just looking to purchase land? I mean, just any land, or is there different types?
Well, I try to define that, what they're looking for. And interestingly, I've had several families come and say, I want my son and his wife and their kids to build a house on this 5-acre lot. I want to buy the next lot next to it for me and my wife and her mother. So they want a little small family compound. It can be in an HOA. It can be in an unrestricted area. It depends. I want views, or I want flat land. I have some horses. I want it to be flat. I want it, or I want a lot of trees. I want it to be more private. So my typical client for land is either the family that's coming to build a little compound, or it's an empty nester and retired people who want to kind of downsize. They want to build their forever home, downsize, and live there throughout, as long as they can.
Now, is there land that's more expensive than others? Like, I would assume, and I may be wrong, but I would assume closer to the cities or closer to Austin would be more expensive as far as land purchases than closer to the outskirts or in between the two cities.
Correct. Austin's really hot right now. Texas is a great place to come, so, for tax reasons, and the land's a little cheaper, although because of the influx of people moving here in New Braunfels, which is just northeast of San Antonio, is the fastest growing city in the U.S. right now.
Really?
Yeah, there's a lot to offer here. We've got the Schlitterbahn water park. There's rafting. There's a huge river that runs through the city, so they come here for rafting and water sports. And there's just so much to do and see. San Antonio offers a lot with the Riverwalk downtown. Austin is one of the music capitals of the world. So, and it's always been a very artsy place to go and drawn a lot of people. A lot of movie stars have places there because it's beautiful, and there's a river that runs through Austin as well, and big lake out there. There's really pretty topography out here.
So I think things are probably going to go up in price there. So if you're going to buy now.
Right, right. The three and under homes that are selling like in a day here. You can't keep them on the market. Yeah. In fact, we have kind of this underground broker group on Facebook, and we put it out there before we even put it live. By the way, here's, before we go live, so it's only to brokers, other realtors, give you an opportunity. If you have a client that needs something that meets this need, and then boom, it'll sell.
So when you were speaking about, like, horse property, what are the things that they're looking for? Somebody says, I want a horse property. What is, like, the top 3 things that they say that they want or that they usually need in a horse property?
Fencing, barn, and available water are the 3 top things. A lot of people come here and say, I want a beautiful home. I want to be in the hill country. It's so pretty there, but I want horse property. And they come and they find out that it's pretty rocky. It can be very rocky here. And I've got 5 horses myself, and I'm on a very hilly, rocky terrain, and they do fine. They say for horses, no hoof, no horse, which means the hoof is very important to the horse, and a lot of horse people understand that. They also think they need to have shoes, metal shoes, and then there's a group here making some plastic shoes that supposedly move with the foot, which the foot moves in and out as they walk. Anyway, that's probably more detailed than you want, but it's oddly enough, they do quite well. They build up tougher feet, and it's more natural for them to walk on this type of terrain than it is in a pasture, because a pasture can be very wet in the wet seasons, and that makes for a soft hoof, which causes other issues. They get thrush, things like that. So that's what I tell people, and then they don't believe me, so I bring them over and show them my horses, and they're astounded.
So the top three things would be definitely the fencing, and then you also said that was it land, right?
A barn. They need shelter and water available. So those are the big top three things. And the fencing it's kind of a catch-22, because you come in and you build your fence. It's very expensive to build, but when you go to sell, it doesn't convey. It doesn't appraise.
So you get no return on it.
Right.
At least you keep your horses inside
the
cage.
Yeah. And horses are expensive to keep, so you want to keep them contained. I mean, it's an investment, that's for sure. Yeah. And then so for horses, you want a safe fence. For cattle, you need barbed wire fence. For horses, you don't, because horses will run into it and hurt themselves. Cattle will run through a wire fence or a wooden fence. They'll just bowl through it. So there are different types of fencing for different types of livestock.
The farm property. What are these different farms used for? Are there, different kind of farms that are different parts of Texas that are known for different kinds of farming? Do you see a higher demand with certain types of farm, and what's selling? Like, is there corn or cotton or hay or?
Hay, around here, coastal Bermuda hay is probably the most prevalent around here. And you have to have, pretty flat areas, pretty flat farming for that. So there's not a lot of that. I don't do as much of that. It would be more south and more west of San Antonio, where the terrain gets flatter. And then very south from here is more corn and more cotton. But honestly, I don't do so much of that as I do more the recreational type, city slicker sort of horse guy.
Okay.
Just a recreational type of horse owner. And then there are the ones that do show, the big dressage circuit here. There's one here in Houston. They have one in Austin. So there is that. And then, of course, the Western is huge. So, and we have rodeos, and we've got rodeo types, and you've got Western types. So those require different types of arenas. They require different types of housing, barn-wise, pretty much.
So now if somebody bought a farm for, let's just say, hay, are there certain types of license or obligations or rules that someone needs to be aware of before buying a farm? I would assume farms are not as a big turnover as far as, buying and selling, but if somebody was interested in starting that, to become a farmer, are there certain rules or licenses that they need to be aware of?
Yeah. If you're going to sell it, you have to have certain certifications. You have to be able to prove that you're properly cultivating it and growing it in a certain environment before you can sell it. I'm sure there are people who just grow it and cut it and sell it, but you really should be have a certain certification for that. And then you get an ag exemption, which then gives you a discount on your taxes.
Discount on taxes is always good.
Always good. Always good. But it's not as easy to get that as you think it is. Trying to apply for an ag exemption, you have to prove what you're doing, so it takes about 5 years to prove that you're really doing what you're saying you're doing. You have a cattle program, you're breeding cattle, that's acceptable, but you have to have that's ongoing. You have to buy and sell and breed. You have to prove that. You have to prove, who's buying, who's selling, and how many you buy, how many you sell, that kind of thing. You have to prove how much hay you cut and sell.
So what about loans for these types of properties? Are there certain types of banks that will do it loans? Are there certain types of loans for, is there different loans for somebody who has a farm to somebody who's just buying a horse property?
The main differences are between horse property, ranch, farm. Usually that's pretty simple. It's very similar to just buying a house. And it takes a little longer because of they got to do surveys and they've got to do, the title searches and make sure all of that is what they say it is, and title insurance and all that. But then when it comes to land, it's very much harder to get loans because most banks do not loan for raw land because they don't want the land. They, if they're going to repossess something, they prefer to have a dwelling on it. So because land is harder to sell than a dwelling, than a home.
So what about if you're buying something, what about an inspection? Is there any kind of inspector that could be hired to do these types of properties, or is there a certain kind of inspector that you want to make sure that you have?
Well, you definitely want to do your regular inspection, which would be, for the dwelling, for the home, but then you might want to have a destructive inspection, like termite inspection on the barn as well. So to make sure that you don't have a termite infestation in the barn as well as the house. So that kind of thing. As far as inspecting the land or the soil, or that's something you would do probably on your own. If it was a concern, you might have that done prior for that option period, but it's not usual. People usually will just do your normal inspections.
So what about closing? Do they usually take longer? Are there other special considerations for closing on this type of property, or are there certain title companies?
I haven't had an issue closing. All my closings have been pretty much close to 30 days.
Okay, and just any title company will handle, pretty much any title company in Texas, I would assume, is pretty educated to handle any one of these types of properties?
Absolutely, yeah. I've never had an issue with any of the title companies around here. They're pretty familiar with it out in this area.
So then I guess one of the other things I want to know is about insurance. I mean, there's obviously got to be different insurance for something with a horse property than somebody who's got a farm, right? And is there specific companies for that, or is it kind of like title companies where everybody who has that market kind of knows, what you need?
There are certain areas in here. I just had an issue where a lady bought a 5-acre ranch for her horse, and she had a problem getting insurance. It was real high because she was in an area that was considered a high brush fire area. So she had to do some digging around. In fact, she called the seller to find out who they were using, and she got a better price. But that was first time for me. And we have the rivers around here, so we have some flood insurance issues. So a lot of properties are in 500-year flood zone or 100-year flood zone, or they're in a flood zone. So that's something you want to check out. If you have horses, you don't want your property flooding. So you want to make sure that you've checked out with FEMA those areas that you're in. And so the insurance will, of course, affect that. If you're in a flood zone, you're certainly paying for flood insurance.
So we pretty much covered what these types of properties are and what to expect when purchasing, but let's talk about selling these types of properties. What do you think somebody should be prepared for when, listing this type of property, any one of them, whether it be a ranch or a farm? I mean, is there certain things that they should be prepared for before listing? Yeah,
they take longer to sell than just a regular single-family home, 1 to 4 single-family home in a subdivision or in an area in city or whatever. They do take longer. It takes a certain type of person that wants that type of property. I've got right now a 17-acre ranch with just a house. So people, if they want to look at that, then they're looking at fencing, building a barn, so they're going to have expense over and above that. And just unique properties that people, it's not usually your typical property. I've got one that's on 5 acres, but it has 2 dwellings. So I had a mother-in-law's casita. And so it takes an unusual person. So it may take a year before it sells. And another one's 55 acres. It's got several buildings. It's a huge arena. Not everybody wants that real formal, arena where they could actually do clinics and shows and things like that. So they're unusual properties that are not going to sell in 30 days.
Now, is there any special marketing for when you're selling a property like this? Besides, I know you guys have kind of a little ninja network for brokers in the area, but is there maybe a different place that you would list a property like this besides the MLS?
I do. I list with horse sites that specifically cater to people looking for horse property that go all over the world. There's a site called International Horse Properties is one. Sometimes I'll do an AdWorks, with Google, so it pops up when people are doing a certain search. Depends on, the client. And I tell them, if you're in a hurry to sell, price it lower. If you've got time to wait, price it higher. but here's your parameters, here are your comps, and so you want to stay as close to that as you can. There are a bunch of horse sites, and they cost more. I mean, they're out-of-pocket fee for me, but you get such a broader audience, and you get an audience who's looking for that type of property.
I know you have a long-standing career in design, and I know you that you used to do a lot of staging, both commercial and residential. So if one of your clients had like a rural property with maybe a home on it for sale or a barn, would you stage both or just one, or have fake horses in there, or like how would you stage a property like that?
I've actually staged horses for photos, when we're doing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sure. It's like put a horse in there.
Yeah.
That's a show.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Look for your
help
horse
them.
inside.
Oh, yeah. The horse. Everybody loves to look at horses. Even if you're not a horse person, everybody loves to look at horses. So they're always pretty to look at. But yeah, because horses are hard to keep, they're not neat and clean and tidy. So you may want to paint your barn. You may want to get new troughs and new buckets and things like that, or you leave what's there and say as is, or the cleaning the areas, keeping the manure cleaned out of there, keeping the tack room neat and all your tack, looking nice and neat, and it helps. Everything helps, just like staging your house. So yes, I do stage everything.
I thought that was a silly question about having the fake horses in there, but it actually makes sense when you explained it.
No, not a fake horse, but a real horse. I mean, if they don't have their own, I'll take mine over there. Yeah.
Good stuff.
I wonder if I can write my horses off as advertising.
Right? Oh, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, it would.
You should definitely look into that. Kind of like if you use your car for, traveling back and forth.
Yeah.
You can write off, per step on a
horse. My horse and trailer. Have horses will travel.
Yeah. So what are a few things that sellers should be aware of besides, obviously the days on market, but when they're listing these types of property with an agent? Because I would assume that any agent would be good at something like this. I mean, like you specifically specialize in this. So I would assume that working with just any agent wouldn't be beneficial, right?
I tend to believe that. It takes a certain type of person to understand horse property, cattle property. It's not like selling your 1 to 4 family home in a neighborhood. It is different. There are other parameters and other things to consider when selling that property or buying it. And I've had several buyers and sellers come to me saying, I need a realtor who understands my needs, and I've been through 3 or 4 realtors, and they don't get it. They don't know what I want. They don't understand what I want. So it does take that unique understanding and lifestyle, and I live it. So I know what they're going through. I know what they're looking for. So, yeah, it definitely is a niche.
So if you could give some advice to your clients before listing a rural property, besides, of course, making sure you're listing it with the person who knows the industry or these niche type of properties, and obviously the days on market, is there another piece of advice you could give your clients before listing a rural property?
Well, I think the main thing is find a realtor that does understand your needs, that they understand what the equipment there means to a potential buyer, and are they in a hurry to move? And the other thing is what conveys, because a lot of that is chattel, but when you're selling farm and ranch, some of these things stay with the property normally, or they don't. There's specific questions in the contract. You do a farm and ranch contract, actually ask, do the troughs stay? Do the pins stay? Do the, chutes stay? There are specific questions on. So I would say ask those questions of a realtor. Do they understand about the barn and the equipment? The other thing is that you have to advise sellers is that, unfortunately, the barn and the fencing does not convey. That you could put a lot of money into those things, but getting it to appraise, it's a whole other can of worms. So when you're doing comps, it's hard to match apples and apples. You're not going to go across the street and match what you've got on your land. Somebody else has, only a house, and you've got, say, a barn and a round pen and an arena, and it's expensive to build those things, but they're not going to convey, and you're not going to, the money back that you've put into it. this is not going to happen. I really try to cater to people. This is horse property, you understand? So they understand and they appreciate the value more than someone who's just looking for a house and, oh, isn't that a cute barn out there? Maybe I'll get a little miniature donkey, which I've seen. People say, oh, well, why are you buying that? It's got a barn. It's got a really nice barn. Well, I don't know. It's just came with the property, and I'll get a donkey. And so,
you name him Jack.
Yeah, exactly. And so, people who do have horses or they do have livestock appreciate the value of the fencing, the round pen, the arena, the barn, and all of those extras that go with having a little ranch.
This has been a really, really educational interview for me and for our listeners,
right.
Especially anybody that's looking for any kind of rural property, farms, land, ranches, all of it, whether in Texas or even, anywhere in the nation, any rural property. It's just really, really educational.
Thank you.
If any of our listeners wanted to get more information about your services, how would they contact you?
Marilyn Agee at 830-221-5027. Or my email is marilynjag@gmail.com.
Okay. Do you have a website or anything that they can?
I do. My website is ravenrealtysolutions.com.
Can you spell that for me?
ravenrealtysolutions.com.
Awesome. Anybody who wants to invest in Texas or looking to buy a ranch, farm, horse property, they really need to hear this interview. It was really,
Thank you,
really
Alicia,
good.
so much. It was such a pleasure speaking with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
No, I completely enjoyed it. I appreciate your time. All right, guys, this is your host, Alicia DeBrell from Insight Media. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.